Two. Hi, this is Casey, wise woman herbalist here in sunny Florida, windy Florida. And today is Monday, March 10th, 2025. I'm very excited. My guest tonight is Dr. Carrie Madej, a beautiful and powerful woman who's really been on top of the agenda for probably longer than I have, for sure longer than I have. And has, really put everything out on the line to get the truth out to people. So I'm very excited about that. So let me just share here. So we've got, um, there she is, the lovely Carrie Madej. We're going to have her up in just a second. Just a reminder that, the medical industry is a business, and so it doesn't really have a financial incentive to make you well. So just keep that in mind anytime you're going to an MD. And, herbal medicine is what I practice and have been practicing since I apprenticed with Susan Weed in 2008. And it's really the people's medicine. It's inexpensive, it's free, and it's incredibly powerful. In fact, most pharmaceutical medicine is based on the plants. It all comes from nature. And whether you want to process it or not is really the point. And I like to get as close to nature as I can. So I'm not a healer of anyone but myself, but I can help you facilitate your own healing journey. So, as we do every week, we're going to sing. And this is a Seneca prayer to the Corn Mother, who was responsible for bringing nourishment and abundance to the tribes. And singing is really said to open up the other side of us, our more spiritual side, It relaxes us and it engages our right brains holographically, as opposed to our linear, dualistic left brains. So the words are here. Feel free to join in. We sing the same song every week. Sacred Corn Mother, come to me. Make my way sacred, fill me with beauty. Sacred Corn Mother, come to me. Make my way sacred, fill me with beauty. Fill me with beauty. Fill me with beauty. Fill me with beauty, that I may bring others beauty. Ah, that always feels good. I think that's why we sing in church. We engage our divine instrument. So Dr. Carrie Madej, osteopathic and internal medicine. She got her medical degree from Kansas City University College of Osteopathic Medicine in 2001. She trained in Georgia to become an internal medicine physician and served as medical director, private clinician, and associate professor of medical students at PCOM in Georgia. She became known on social media in 2020 when she sounded the alarm on experimental COVID shots. Her experiences over the years have educated her on the plan for transhumanism, genetic modification, nanotechnology, and artificial intelligence for humanity. And we've talked on this show multiple times about that. She believes this technology is a threat to our civilization, and I agree. Her focus is now on providing solutions to the current health crises. Dr. Madej believes a physician should be a teacher of health to the patient, as well as identify the causes of disease. Her teaching incorporates the importance of body, mind, and spirit in achieving wellness, and that the balanced body has the inherent ability to heal itself, very much in resonance with the wise woman tradition. It's her mission for us to remember the sacredness of life, our ability to heal, and our connection to God. So with that, welcome, Carrie.
Hi, Kimberly. So happy to be with you today. So thanks for having me on.
Very, very happy. And, I've had the pleasure of meeting you a couple of times, and I understand you've now moved to the free state of Florida, so and not that far, so hopefully we'll be seeing more of each other soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, definitely. Happy to be here.
I had Patrick Wood on the show maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago talking about technocracy, and I don't really have a particular theme in mind. You're so well versed, but that seems to in my be really at top of my mind these days. And it's sort of a battle between the artificial and the organic in a lot of ways. It feels like that. And so, can you give us a little background on your experience with this, with this agenda? Where does it come from? What does it mean?
Sure. Well, I was a practicing internal medicine physician, clinician, admitting people into the hospital back in the day, and this theme came up. Um, they first had a deterioration index or an algorithm in the hospitals. They tried to introduce that in my hospital, Piedmont Fayette, where the doctor would just follow the algorithm given to them. Okay. And it was the person was assigned a number, and they're still doing it today. So you're just given a value based on your age, what you do for a living, your comorbidities, all kinds of things, which is fairly impersonal. Well, as I started to see a lot of the agenda, I started questioning it, because I was a little naive to what would happen when you questioned it. I not only was I attacked back then, this is well before COVID, but I guess at some point I was introduced to these meetings. These were business owners meetings. I guess they thought, well, if she's not going to go along with it, maybe we can get her to join us. This is my idea. So it was a business owners meeting where it was quite special in Metro Atlanta, and they talked about having making people healthier through health apps. And this was where there would be a two-way communication of the physical human body and their smart device, where all the data would be fed to a central computer. But not only would the information be taken from the body, but then a decision would be made by this program, and then there could be a message put back into the human body. So then a result or an effect would happen to the human body. So modifying the body without the person knowing it. This was talked about. Sanjay Gupta was a physician presenting this data to us. So I was shocked about all of this. And I also attended a meeting with Dr. Craig Ventnor, which is the father of human genomics, an A4M meeting around 2013. And so he talked about all kinds of things too. So this was presented to us in multiple different ways. So I knew about the agenda, but I never went ahead and joined any of these groups. And it wasn't until 2020 when I learned about the COVID shot, about them wanting to give everybody something they called a vaccine, and then seeing the ingredients. And then it hit me, all the things that I had learned before from these meetings were all coming together in one blitzkrieg. And that's when I cried for a bit. I mourned for a bit, but then I got a righteous anger and I started to speak out. And the rest is history.
That's that's interesting. I just wanted to put a pin in that date, around the 2012, 2013 timeframe. Because back then, and my audience knows I came screaming out of the left in 2021. But there was, and I'd always considered myself a feminist. I mean, woman is a fully human person. That's all it means to me. But clearly, Gloria Steinem was hired to take that in a very grotesque direction. But what you may not be aware of is that all the way back then, there were feminists like myself protesting this idea of, men becoming women and then taking over women's spaces. And the reason we started protesting is because they just started showing up in our bathrooms, and they started showing up at our women's groups, and they started showing up at, like, pregnancy centers and rape crisis centers. And we were like, no. And come to find out that right around 2012 there's a group of billionaires behind it, of course, and they hired Denton's law firm in the UK to create a strategy document for transhumanism back then. And so what they basically said was, look, let's ride the coattails of the lesbian and gay, movement, because lesbian and gay marriage had finally been legalized. So, they really didn't have a cause. And so now you had this huge NGO with no mission. So they were basically out of funding. So they were very easily co-opted with all this grant money. And so they added the T and the Q and the I and the A plus plus plus, and then they started, and they recommended that they keep that quiet. They feed grant money into the medical schools and to the academic institutions. And obviously, businesses were given incentives as well. So it's very interesting to me that you were getting that sort of pitch back in 2013, and it dovetails perfectly with the larger agenda that, the likes of Rothblatt, Stryker, Gill, Soros, and others, Pritzker, put together back in 2012 with this strategy document. So it's fascinating.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, they said that Atlanta had been chosen one of maybe 12 to 18 cities for these pilot studies, where they would make sure that we could be healthier through the app and being connected to the app. So Atlanta's endpoint was lying. So every time that you would lie, and they had many different mechanisms to monitor that in a human body, there would be a repercussion on you, and then a social credit system. So they were talking about this out in the open, and I realized, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're just saying this. Aren't they afraid of us speaking out? And then I realized when I did speak about it, no one believed me.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah,
it's,
they're
yeah,
crazy.
now here we are.
Right. Well, the whole mind control agenda. I mean, I've had Kathy O'Brien on multiple times, and I don't think people really appreciate, how real that is and ongoing it is, to influence the way that we think. And, but, the great thing about Kathy is, she's really a lesson in healing. We can all heal, and it's all about, she's really all about love and the solution, as it were, but one of the most joyous spirits that I know.
Yeah.
um, so as opposed to the, and I don't know, to me it just smacks of such arrogance, this whole technocracy, this whole transhumanism, this whole idea that, first of all, it just seems like, oh, okay, well, we know better than God, you know, like these ideas that, well, God made a mistake, they put this kid in the wrong body, or, God put this body part on male penises that really shouldn't be there and it needs to be surgically removed. I mean, what is this? It's hubris. I mean, to the extreme. Maybe this is the pride that goeth before the fall. What's your opinion? I mean, it just seems like this attitude, and it's not holding life sacred.
No, not at all. Well, I'll tell you what Craig Ventnor said in the beginning of his talk, and it kind of sums it up. He said, what is God? God creates. Now we can create, so now we're gods. And that's how he started out his talk. So I think it's really about power and control. I wonder if we could go back in time to look at some of these people's childhoods. Maybe they were picked on at school, maybe they felt they weren't worthy. I'm not sure if they'll, some issue happened in their childhood for sure, and now they feel like they're getting back, or they have this ability to control other people. It's really a sickness, I'd say. But yes, there is no reverence for God, no reverence for creation, no reverence for the sacredness of life. Again, working from a reptilian or a primitive brain, not from a limbic system where there's empathy and compassion as loving kindness. I do believe we're in this spiritual war, seed of the serpent, seed of the woman, and we are literally in these end days seeing it happen in real time.
Mm.
Uh, and it's really a choice that we're all making. Do you stay asleep and you let whatever happen happen to you, or you take a stand and you come alive for the first time in your life, and you know that we are made in our Creator's image. So through the word, we have power. Through the word, we can declare. And through the word, we have authority over and dominion over the seed of the serpent. And really, you've got to look at it that way because we cannot battle them on their ground with the technocracy. Like you said, I can't compete with that. But when we take it up to the higher level, yes, we can.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. And it's interesting because, ultimately it will fail. And there was, I don't know, this coming totally out of left field, but I don't know if you know are familiar with this study that was done in I think it was somewhere in Africa with this baboon troop, some kind of, I think it was baboon, some kind of ape where the males were alpha males and they were very aggressive and they would, beat the crap out of the smaller males and the females and everybody was stressed out. And there was a scientist traveling there for many, many years to study stress and measure their cortisol levels, et cetera, and so on and so on. So one year he comes and suddenly the tribe is like all peaceful and like, there's no alpha males. And so what had happened was they had come upon a cache of meat. And the alpha males, being the alpha males, had decided that they were going to eat all the meat. Well, guess what? The meat turned out to be poisoned. And so once the alpha males were all gone, the troop actually reverted to more societally supportive contact. And so, they groomed each other, they loved each other. And if one of these, a male from another wandering tribe came through and started to start up this stuff again, they would run him away. So I was quite encouraged by that, right? Because this hubris, this arrogance ultimately leads to their destruction. And once that occurs, nature always tends toward perfection. I think that, we have to give up this idea that, I think, that gives you so much trust, right? Because if nature is always tending toward perfection, because God is always tending toward perfection, right? All we have to do is get in the flow of that. So I was encouraged by that little story because nobody had to push back or resist or do anything. God took care of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know, should I, by this act of, resisting, am I actually engaging that energy? Or, I really, I really, it's,
I you're onto something there because with all the challenges that come with speaking out, all the attacks, I had to really take a hard look and learn some lessons. And when God says that Exodus 14:14, he's like, I will fight your battles, I'm paraphrasing. It's about being still and also knowing how do you come back with your words? Do you go tit for tat? Well, because I don't know how about you, I don't feel very good doing that, even though I might be in the right, because you're going down a level, going down a couple notches.
you're
So,
taking your vibration down to their frequency.
and that's an issue right now, right? And everything's tit for tat, even at the highest levels of our administration, right? So it's about, okay, how do I want to respond, even though it might take a little longer? The truth always comes out. Maybe it's not as fast as we want it to, but it's about how we stand in our own power through the Creator, and then also how we speak. The words are powerful. Words created us. So we are co-creators. So what if we, instead of going tit for tat, we start to be the example what we want in the world? I mean, it's
Mm.
not like a to me it was like this epiphany when it shouldn't have been an epiphany. I'm gonna laugh at
We
myself.
all have these aha moments as we turn the spiral of life, don't we?
You're like, wait a minute. Yeah, instead of being in the system that we are born in and conforming to that system, which doesn't work, perhaps we're supposed to be better than that. Yeah, what a novel thought that is.
Yeah,
And everybody wants love, even the bad people. And
that's
so they want attention. They're just doing it in a wrong way. And we've learned to go down to their level and fighting. And this is not how this is a losing battle in that way. So we all have to learn how to use our words more with loving kindness, how to use it, be critical. Um, but yeah, it's good.
because, I think once you recognize that we are divinely made, we and all of the information, all of this knowledge, even though they've done their best to hide it from us, it's still there. It's in our cells, right? We know it. It's not a matter of learning, it's really more a matter of remembering a lot of times and learning how to access that. Um, and they've been hiding these secrets for a long time, right? I mean, people think they're listening to science and it's really a paid promotional ad. So, understanding that that's been hidden. But, what I always suggest is, let's think about what is a definition of health, you know, because some people define being healthy as being completely free of any problem. And that's kind of an ideal we can't really attain. But and learning to listen to the body and use health challenges as lessons, because every time you learn something, right, when you come through a health challenge. And I don't know if you're familiar at all with Louise Hay, but she did this whole, she healed herself of vaginal cancer without using a doctor. And she was raped as a child. So the point is that we have so much power within us from because we are, the breath of source, the breath of life, the spark of the divine is what animates our souls. So we need to learn how to align with our source. So, I think it's less a matter of learning what to do. In fact, the first step in the beauty way is to do nothing, right? And that's the be still and listen so that you can really start to hear what God, creator, source is saying, right? Meditation, prayer. This is where we are able to be still and to align, right, with our source and then collect the information so we can tell our stories. And then obviously our minds are very important in terms of engaging that energy. And then, there's lifestyle medicine. But, the thing that strikes me here is the very first thing we deal with is the spirit, right? And then we deal with the mind, and then we deal with the body through lifestyle medicine. And so a lot of times you'll hear people say body, mind, and spirit. And I think it's really just we've got it a bit backwards. I think the spirit is the what needs tending to the most. And then get our minds right. And then when we've done that, our wise healers within will tell us which path to choose, right? In terms of our healing journey. So I don't know, that's just the way I approach things.
I agree with you. I had to be a patient for a little while myself, and I had to practice what I preach, and I definitely can say that that's what works. I believe it was God first, prayers. Second was my power of my mental fortitude of like a knowing of that this is not going, what they told me, the doctors told me was my future was not my future. That was not my history, not my story. This is the way it's going to go. That mental fortitude is huge. And we have prayers and we take that stance, then we go outside of time, space
Right.
into the quantum field, which is real. This is not conspiracy. We weren't taught the proper science, but literally that's where miracles take place. And one story I'd like to tell real quick about my healing journey that I discovered. So my leg was the worst that was hurt in a crash that I was in. And so when I first saw my leg in the crash, my foot was literally turned 120 degrees the opposite direction, which was not good. And I can tell you that at that moment, I did panic. And then this is how I compartmentalized it. I just looked at my leg, then I said, okay, that's the patient's leg. I'm the doctor. Okay. And that's how I dealt with it. Well, 2 months later, my leg was healing. I had the surgery, but then it stopped healing. It started to reverse, started to swell more pain, looked more deformed. And of course, I kind of panicked. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm rejecting the metal. I'm rejecting, the plates that are in there. And I prayed about it, and the Lord answered me. And it was like, you've never connected back to your leg. And I remembered that I never accepted my leg after that moment. I never touched my leg in 2 months. I never touched it with my hands. So I had to go back, and you know how I was nervous. How crazy is this? I was nervous to touch it. So I had to touch it because I didn't have a lot of sensory feelings, the nerves were not healed yet. Okay, it took about 2 years. Yeah. So then I had to feel it, but it was still not receptive at that moment. So I just had to work on it, massage it. And then I'd say after a couple days, I reconnected to my leg. And then all of a sudden, after about a week or two, it completely went back to healing at full pace again. And I learned such a valuable lesson about how we don't connect to many things of our own body, how we don't learn to feel our own body. And I've heard a lot of women's stories where they're telling me, oh, I don't feel my own breasts. Maybe their husband does, their partner does, but they don't. They're afraid to touch themselves, or they're afraid to really look deep within themselves, whether it's mental or spiritual. We're not whole then. We're not really connecting with our whole person, what makes us us. But I thought that was an interesting story to tell, how I did not connect back to my leg and
Right.
what happened to it.
Wow, that is really powerful because as soon as you did, it's almost like it's like plugging in into to source, the energy source, right? It's like, oh, we had a little broken connection there and now it's reconnected. So of
Yeah.
course everything's going to continue to flow. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So we can literally cause a part of ourselves to die in a way.
Yes.
Like, think about the people with cardiac issues. How many do we have now? There's such a spiritual and mental connection, broken hearts, anger, those kinds of things that you harness there. So we have to start looking at these things. It's something that's been ignored in our health system for so long. So, yeah.
And speaking of a broken heart, I lost my sister just over a week ago.
Oh, gosh.
And she wasn't really my sister, but she had two Modernas, and one of them was kind of a bad batch. And it just, I'm so angry. I'm so angry.
Yeah.
And, after her shots, she went and got more boosters. And even after we talked and I told her, hey, one of these batches isn't so good, but she had constant problems. And ended up having to be on oxygen. She'd fallen, she'd broken things. Her spine disintegrated during a surgery. And so she was in so much pain. In fact, her last accident was she fell. Her sodium levels crashed after a colonoscopy. Lord knows why she was getting this colonoscopy, but she planked apparently. And when she fell over the door saddle and she broke her sternum and had been in the hospital and rehab and so on. Of course, I didn't even hear about it till she was home. So, on the one hand, I'm really angry that she's not here anymore. And on the other hand, I'm so joyous that she's not in pain and she's reunited with Source. And non-physical. So it's just this,
Yeah.
it's difficult to deal with when you see, you know, what's been done to our loved ones.
Yeah.
But then you have to understand that death isn't such, we've had this idea that death is the worst thing that could possibly happen. when in fact it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. I mean, this is when we reemerge into this pure positive source God place, right? This vibration, right? We're just in we're source having a physical experience, and so that's why it's important that we learn how to trust ourselves. And, we've been mind controlled for so long that, of course, we're like you said, we've been trained. Oh, if something serious goes wrong, you got to go to the doctor, because the doctor is the authority. I fell a couple of years ago and tore the tendons, the three inner tendons of my ankle. And I didn't go to the doctor. People are like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're not going to the doctor." I'm like, "Well, why am I going to the doctor? All they're going to do is tell me to walk on crutches and maybe give me one of those weird shoes, and they're going to charge me a bunch of money." So I just, yeah, I was on crutches for a few months, but people have been trained into this fear response around something that doesn't feel right. And so when they're afraid, what do? They go to outside of themselves. We've been trained to go outside of ourselves for the answer. Take this pill, do this thing, do, whatever it might be, as opposed to starting with, hey, let's ask source what's going on and then figure out where to go from there. So I'm sorry, I just
No,
babbled thinking about things.
there's many things you pointed out there. The heart, I think these shots, there's a spiritual battle with them. It's not just physical, and they were meant to attack our hearts, so we have to realize that, spiritually, mentally, and then physically, that this is a spiritual battle. And I was telling you earlier before the show started about holy blessed milk thistle, or holy blessed thistle. That's a Mediterranean plant. And back in the bubonic plague days, the Benedictine monks found that this worked beautifully at healing the plagues. But also, it has an affinity for the heart, to heal the heart, particularly a poisoning of the heart, like a myocarditis. I've used it myself for different things. I think it's a wonderful plant to use. You can use it in a tincture. I grew it last year. I'm growing it again. So that's a good thing for people to know about that with the heart. Um, and then also with for going on to these shots and shedding, just know that the biofilm is another thing that people need to address, which starts in the gut, and it's something that people need to remove. So chlorine dioxide enemas are really good binders along with that, like activated charcoal, diatomaceous earth, that sort of thing, are very effective with that. But yeah, it's a spiritual battle. They're attacking our heart. We've got to be showing more loving kindness to one another. It's a powerful thing. That's how miracles happen.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to me too because the heart, um, I think Greg Reese did like a 5-minute segment talking about how the heart is not a pump, it's a vortex.
Yeah. Yeah,
And you
and to have
know,
a plasma energy field, it's fascinating. It's powerful. It has information, a coherent domain that forms around us that has an information that exchanges with other people. That's why they kept us 6 feet apart. They tried to.
yes. And
Yeah.
then, our aura. And, it's interesting to me too, coming from the left, because, now most of my friends are, quote, from the right or left refugees like me. But it's fascinating to me because there's a very rich tradition of working with plants and natural things on the left. And it's not so much on the right. I don't find too many herbalists and midwives and naturopaths on the right. But we're getting there. And
Ew.
the wonderful thing is it's great to just give up the whole right left thing, you know, because really we're all we've sort of been trained into this idea, again, this mind control agenda that, that, you know, and there are different programs, right? For the leftists, right? All of the right people on the right are gun-toting, hicks. that, want to, I don't know what they want to do, but there's a whole bunch of programming for the people on the right. And so it's all designed to keep us fussing and worrying about something, right? And, but one of the things that I have to go back to is the idea of unconditional love, because unconditional love, what does that really mean? That means that I'm in alignment with my creator, who is love.
Mhm.
And I don't need for you to be or do or say anything in order for me to maintain that alignment. So, in some respects, when we start to engage in sort of a tit for tat kind of thing where we get attacked, what we really are better off doing is sometimes it's better to be quiet in your knowing.
Yeah.
Because when we start to interact with this, then it pulls us down in our frequency, right? And so, really, and this is going to sound kind of crazy, but my new motto is I love you so much, I don't care what you think.
I love that. One thing I've said to people is that I love you so much, I'm willing to lose you as a friend. Sometimes you have to say some hard truths to somebody, right? Or important, but say it with such loving kindness. That's
Hmm.
when we have to learn how to speak. I love the British because they can give a critique and it sounds so wonderful, doesn't it?
I know. And you're like, oh, may I have another, please?
I would love another critique, please. And so I think we have a lot to learn in the United States about how to speak to one another. We can take it up a couple notches, I think, you know. Our words can have such power if we understand how to use them. And yeah, it's really about standing and being still. We have a problem about being still. Our attention span is what, 15 seconds now on TikTok or something. We've got to sit there and be still and be okay with ourselves, to listen to ourselves. How many people are running all the time? They don't know how to listen themselves, let alone sit still, like you said, and listen to nature around us and the plants. This is how we know how to heal ourselves. And, in my clinic, I was always teaching people. I said, I'm not going to do this forever, you guys. You can't keep coming back to me. You need to do what I do. You can do it because it's teachable.
Right.
And it was about learning how to touch their body, feel their body, and feeling the heat pattern changes. It wasn't anything that was, a special trait I had, and anybody can do it. You just have to learn how to sit still and listen and feel the body. And everybody can do it. I think we've got to start to go back to that, learn ourselves again, learn to be in ourself, like you said. And these are teachable skills. They really are.
And it used to be that our mothers and our grandmothers were the teachers of these skills.
Yeah.
And unfortunately many of them are gone, so we don't have them to refer to. But I do remember how, and how we cook. I often it's very controversial, I always tell people, cook your vegetables really well and eat your meat and milk as raw as possible. And they go, well, wait, what? And I said, well, yeah, because the plants have this really strong cell wall, and you have to break it. You either have to cook or freeze or dry or ferment it in order to get inside to the really goody goodies. But meat and milk are like us. We don't have a cell wall. That's why milk is baby's first food, and it's most easily digestible. So, but that really, that just people just like, wait, what? I shouldn't be eating like raw vegetables? And I'm like, well, you can if you want, but particularly the cabbage family plants can be problematic when you eat them raw, like broccoli or cauliflower. So, but everything that we've been taught that is in the, USDA food pyramid, let me just share this here because it's so shocking. It's like everything that we've been taught is completely backwards. It was, this whole food pyramid is so backwards, right? I mean, instead of having milk, right, they want us to to drink nut juice and to eat bugs and to use seed oils that are GMO, by the way, genetically modified organisms. And then we already know our body's full of microplastics. And then, some of the other agendas, like unbelievably, California, this is just one of the things California did, but they wanted to give surrogates to gay males in the name of fertility equality. One thing that they have done is the California Medical Association has deemed healthy breast tissue as uh, some kind of a unnecessary something so that insurance can pay for it when girls have who thinks their boys have their breasts removed. Insurance will cover it. I mean, it's just incredible. And I think, people need to realize that the victors always write the histories, right?
Yeah,
So by, whoever wins the war is going to talk about, write the history about who was in the right and who was in the wrong. And so, like, gee, how many millions of women were burned alive? And we've been taught to fear these witches, which were midwives and herbalists for the most part, and wealthy widows, instead of the men who burned them alive. What an interesting thought, right? It's like, wow, is it ever justified to burn someone alive?
yeah.
We don't think about that, right? Um, and like the Flexner report, they after the Flexner report came out, Rockefeller used that to get rid of all the osteopaths, the naturopaths, the herbalists, the midwives, and there was no competition. So, really since the early 1900s, uh, we have been indoctrinated into this way of approaching our bodies as kind of like machines, as opposed to the beautiful, divinely imbued um, creations that we are.
It's true. And even when I moved from Michigan, which is a big osteopathic state, to Georgia, which was not at the time, I didn't realize, they still called us witches. And I was told that, okay, yes, my scores were great, grades, all this, but they didn't accept my kind, you know, witch. They literally would say this. So I had to have some other MDs write letters for me. And I was the first osteopath in a program in Macon. And they said, don't you know how lucky you are? And I honestly was a little bit cocky at the time because I was a little sick of it. I said,
Right.
I think, I think you don't know how lucky you are. I said, I've had all this training. I have all these degrees because I didn't even want to be there at the time. I'm like, I'll just go back to Michigan because it was this, I don't want to be called a witch, you know?
Yeah.
Um, it was crazy. And so things have changed, of course. And then unfortunately, our training osteopaths are now identical to the allopaths. So there is no difference anymore. So they were successful in eradicating the osteopathic profession, in my opinion. So it's too bad, but
It is. I mean, and now, I mean, I know actually my best friend, the year after I apprenticed in '08, my best friend got terminal stage 4 cancer and rhabdomyosarcoma in a 12 centimeter tumor in the chest, mets on both adrenals, about golf ball size. And she's still with us, by the way. But I remember it was really interesting because there was obviously she needed to get, step 5 and 6 right away because she was very close to death at that point. But I remember at one point during her chemo, she'd gotten some good test results, something. I was like, oh, thank the goddess or something. And there was a woman there, a nurse, and she whips around and she goes, goddess? And she like got in my face. She was this Catholic, it was St. Luke's, Roosevelt in Manhattan. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, did that offend you in some way? And it was so interesting to me that just the idea of the female as divine was so shocking for people. And I think people need to be reminded that God is not a male or a female. God is both of those things and and has those different aspects. So and I think I see God as like a prism. And uh from this angle, I see it through this archetype, and through that angle over there, you see it, right? But we're all really describing the same thing, right? Which is our source, which is our creator.
Well, in
So,
the Bible, there are many names of God. And if you look at the Hebrew names, which you know, the Old Testament, the Tanakh was written in Hebrew.
mm,
So everything has a feminine or masculine, and you'll see many of the names, Adonai Zavaat, the Lord of Hosts, the Lord of Armies, El Shaddai, these are feminine names of God. So feminine manifestation, which, you know, they've been able to polarize this,
mhm.
obviously now to keep us divided. But if we are all created in God's image, of course, God has a feminine aspect too. God is too much for just to have one name or to have one aspect. It's everything. Of course it is. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, yeah, no. There was a really interesting book. I'm just trying to see if I have the slide here. It was a fellow named Leonard Schlein, and he was talking about history and how we moved from being primarily dual hemispheric thinkers, utilizing both right and left hemispheres of the brain, into almost exclusively left brain or linear thinkers. And that was right around the time, by the way, that the female aspects of the divine started to really be less emphasized. And so his theory was essentially it's when writing was invented, the alphabet, because instead of being in that right brain holographic space of, oh, okay, I take a picture of it in its wholeness, right? I see the whole thing, like he uses an example. If you see my watch, right? You have a full picture of it. But I could also go in the other room and write write pages and pages describing the watch. But which would be, a more accurate picture of the watch, right? So, but what it did was it created this linear and dualistic, so you can't get to the meaning until you get to the end of the word, right? And then you have to string all of these different linear things together, and then it's very dualistic. It's either one or the other. It's either black or white. There's no like, you know, so it was very, very interesting to me. And basically it seems like this right half of the brain, which is often referred to as the feminine side of the brain, seems to really have atrophied. And so, and I had Susan Weed on last week, and I don't know, maybe you can confirm this, but she indicated that women have a membrane that joins the two hemispheres of the brain, but males do not. Do you
I
know?
did not know that. Let me ask somebody about that. That's interesting if that's true. I've never heard that.
Never
Eh,
heard that either, but it would be an interesting exercise. Because I
Because
know,
if that was true, there would be perhaps maybe more communication. Because the fascia is what communicates everything in the whole body, the electrical conduction of the body. So I need to look that up.
yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Uh,
But clearly, and this is part of like singing, art, all of those, and really spirituality is much more a right brain exercise than it is a left brain exercise. And so, um, you know, I think it's easier for people to think of it that way than as masculine and feminine, right? Because I also don't think it's necessarily masculine and feminine. I think it's receptive and projective, right? So, and I think of, the yin and the yang. They don't sit one on top of the other, right? Where they're really basically spinning in an endless disequilibrium. So it's this movement and this flow, which is what sustains life. So I think you know the men and women need to understand that um, a lot of this feminine stuff, witchy stuff, has actually been hidden from them, and can really um, augment their power and their well-being. So.
So the big, big problem is the polarization of everything. You talked about that earlier, particularly in the churches today. You know, this is all bad and this is all good. For instance, crystals, right?
Right.
How many times I have this discussion, I'm like, first of all, You've got a watch that's run on a crystal. You've got lasers that are run on a crystal. They have an immense amount of power. They all have different attributes. But if you take it and you try to make some kind of a spell to do something with it, yeah, that's making it and adulterating in a bad way. But God has listed all the crystals in the Bible. They're all in heaven.
Mm.
And he created them all, or I call it he, but we
Right.
know that God is everything. But
Yes.
the thing is, people want to polarize everything, right? So it's natural healing too. Someone said homeopathy was witchcraft. I'm like, how is it witchcraft? It's really terrible because then you do the same thing with masculine and feminine. It's all polarized. But that is the enemy doing that. That's the adversary doing this. So we have to get away from that and look and see things and use our critical thinking skills and look at what the intention is behind it before just throwing everything out.
I
Because
can.
energy, too, when I first started talking about energy, it was attacked by people in the church. Energy. And I'm like, well, you get an EKG, you get an EEG, you're okay with that. You get static shocks, you're okay that you can do that. But for some reason, you don't like any other kind of energy. Well, it depends on how you're using it and what intention do you have, you know?
Well, and that's really how mind control works.
Yeah,
It's information control and then repetition,
yeah.
right? So, and I'll just share one slide. Whoops, hang on. I'll just share a slide with you, to give you a sense. Shoot, I just lost my screen here. Got too many screens. But it's really, and this is why I say, it's really the victors writing the story. Because let's take the witches, for example. It wasn't that they were really demons. These were, you know, like I said, mainly herbalists, midwives, and wealthy widows that were gone after. And like anytime you know how to heal yourself, they're going to call you a witch. Unless you're using, this sort of thing that um, you know, so my point is they'll do anything to hide the
Mhm.
information that is the most powerful to your own health and well-being from you.
Yeah.
They will burn you at the stake, they will stretch you on a rack, they will do anything. But who was the philosopher that said something like the well-being of humanity is the alibi of tyrants, you know. So, because you got to tend to your own book, right?
Yeah.
And the only people who really want to be like in charge, and this is so interesting to me. Lee Merritt talks all the time about how they can't, there's no test for the psychopath. They can't weed them out from submarine duty, right?
Yes.
Um, you can't
Mhm.
really tell. Um, and so, what I think we really need to understand is that when hierarchy by its nature, the average person, right? The average, you know, naturopath, osteopath, herbalist, midwife doesn't have aspirations to run the world, right? We just want to
Good
do
point.
work, right? But the people who want to climb that ladder, they have a very different sort of mindset. And it's usually the psychopaths that are very, very good at climbing that ladder. And then when they're at the top, then they are in control of everything underneath. So I think it's important that when we see hierarchy, and particularly when we see dogma, we need to question it because everything we know that they have lied to us for generations about everything. So all I'm suggesting is keep an open mind, right? Keep an open mind, think critically, go within and see what your wise healer within, your source, your God, your creator, thinks about that. And the way that you know that what your thoughts are and if they're aligned with source creator is how you feel. Isn't that nice? We were given such an easy way of knowing whether we're connected with source or not. So if our opinion about something is aligned with source's opinion, God's opinion about a subject, we'll feel happy and joyful. But when we're very far away from God's opinion of around the subject, we'll feel depressed and angry and fearful. So we know what the truth is. We can feel it. It resonates within us. And so that actually requires you reject your left brain sometimes and everything that you've learned in school.
I always say the truth doesn't mind to be questioned, right? So shouldn't have to worry about questioning something. That's okay. Yeah,
Indeed.
imagine that.
Yeah,
But yeah, they so being called a witch, go back to that, was because also when you can use physical signs on the body to tell what was going on inside of the body. And so that, in essence, in allopathic medicine was being a witch. So
correct.
that is crazy. So this is just what allopaths used to do, but yet it was a lost art. And so we just need to bring that art back. But it's really crazy how they try to take away our own ability to diagnose somebody or diagnose ourselves,
Right.
because then you have to rely on a machine or an instrument.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
And the science will change depending on the precision of the instrument.
Oh,
So it changes all the time depending on how well they can measure. I mean, and they're down here in Florida now. You'll probably be apprised that the naturopaths are beating the drum to get licensed.
well, you know
And
what's gonna happen.
well, and it was interesting. Dr. Pierre Corey was at a fundraiser for this. I couldn't go because my car was in the shop, but I said to the organizer, I said, I'm not really sure that why would you want to get a license? Because the definition of license is it gives you the ability to do something that without the license would be illegal. So, as an herbalist, we don't want to be licensed. We saw what happened with the midwives. They made them get licensed and then they wiped them out. And then in Germany, which does license herbalists, you now need a prescription to get a plant.
Well, yes, this is a problem, and I agree with you. This is a big danger in doing that because I'm working with structured water and water that's being imprinted. Well, technically, what they're trying to do is make that into a drug now that they can then, the powers that be, can control. Meaning you can't even imprint water now. So they tried to do this in Ohio and accuse a colleague of mine of saying that they were giving a medicine to person because they had imprinted water. Okay.
Wow.
So this is the danger of saying you want to be licensed because then they have a chokehold over you. Then they have a way of taking away our natural God-given right to do something, to speak over water, to put light onto water, to imprint it. I mean, come on. But you have to read the fine print and you've got to know what they've done, but just look in history to see what they've done in the past. And it's pretty easy to know what that will lead to if that happens here.
I mean, to my way of thinking, licensing just paints a target on your back. And by the way, I have lots of licenses. I have a real estate license, I have a mortgage license. I had a CPA license, and all of those licenses basically subject you to liability,
Yeah. And
and
also restrict the use of something that should be normal to people you know, it's just crazy, just to look at for instance, homeopathy. Homeopathy is just an imprinting. It's an energy that's an energy signature. And so making that license then makes you not be able to imprint something with words or with I mean,
right,
this is crazy. We can't get to that point. Then you're being persecuted for your thoughts then.
right. Well,
Yeah.
I and the only thing I could come up with, because the organizer's daughter apparently is a naturopath and has spent all this money going to a naturopathic school and so on and so on. And the only thing I can think of is that they want to bill Medicare and Medicaid and the insurance plans.
It's
But,
terrible.
but that also leads me to a different thought process. And I was a philosophy major, I was philosophy and economics major. So I'm really interested and I wrote my thesis on distributive justice, mainly around healthcare and how we dole out, things. But anyway, I think that we have to also tear down this old Rockefeller model of healthcare and reimbursement and insurance and blah, 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 blah. But I think we need to reconceive it in its entirety. I mean, what do you think?
It needs to implode, and it is imploding on itself. All the data that goes into Medicare, Medicaid, all the private insurers is all collected into these central algorithms to a super brain computer. People need to understand that this is what's happening. And that number I was talking about, the deterioration index, is then assigned to every single person. Why do you want to feed anything more into that system is beyond me. And then going in the system, there's so much administration, red tape, middlemen, you name it. So that this is why the cost is so high. If you just bypass all of that, just fee for service, get rid of all of that, do the PMAs, then it's doable. That's doable for everybody. And then it's for the best interest of the patient. There's a communication, there's a client and a teacher really is a teacher. That's how it should go. It should go back to, and then apprenticeships, right? Without all these fancy education, then what does it mean? Then a diploma on the wall, and that doesn't mean you're good at what you do. But an apprenticeship, you go to somebody that has a good reputation. You want to make sure, and that person doesn't let you graduate until they feel like you're worthy of their reputation. That's
Correct.
what we go back to.
That's right. And having done a shamanic herbal apprenticeship, I completely understand that because there was no way I could learn it. I mean, even the correspondence students that she has, it's a completely different experience when you're there, milking the goats and herding the goats and, mucking the stalls and, harvesting the wild salad and, making sure the goats don't get run over when they cross the road and, things like that. So, but you never learn any of that, you know, with words because words don't teach, only experience teaches.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the pendulum swinging back the other way, and the people will demand that, or at least a certain segment of the population. That's what we'll go back to eventually, and having students taught the proper way of how to talk to a patient, how to diagnose, how to have an engagement with them. It's a relationship. Listening to them, 95% of the time, the patient will tell you what the problem is if you let them, if you just listen and let them talk.
Well,
Yeah.
I've found that the doctors have no interest at all in your opinion about what's going on in your body. In fact, it's been my experience that some of them, in fact, it was funny. My friend who was diagnosed terminal stage 4 back in '09, I remember the her chemo, her oncologist was like, "Oh, that nausea has nothing to do with the chemo." And I'm like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. But the good news is, for anybody out there who's choosing chemo, if you just eat a tablespoon or two of whole milk plain yogurt, guess what? Your nausea will be gone instantly. And it works for non-chemo nausea too. So, and this is the thing, herbal medicine really is the people's medicine. It's inexpensive, it's simple, it's powerful, and sometimes it's even free if you live somewhere where the things are growing. Um, and so that's a very much of a danger to an industry, right? Because if you're in your kitchen making your own herbal medicine and you know what to make to be ready for whatever might typical things that might come your way, and you're also nourishing yourself with herbs and foods and plants, then wow, suddenly the medical industry doesn't really have a huge clientele because the chronic problems resolve. I've had clients, get off of type 2 diabetes medications, right? In just like 3, 4 months. Get off of almost all their medications. And usually when they come to me, they're already in like the double digit territory in terms of their chronic meds. I mean, I don't know what your experience is, Carrie, but so much pharmaceutical medicine now being pumped into people, and very little in terms of the way of nourishment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, most of what I did in my clinic was just take people off the meds and they got better. And I mean, they thought I was great, but just taking them off the medicine because one thing led to another side effect to another side effect, or looking at the recalls on the meds. I mean, people need to look for recalls on their medications. You'll find them a lot of times, and your pharmacist and your doctor doesn't even know it.
Right.
So you've got to look at these things and know that your body was meant to heal itself. I think that's where both of us probably look at the person differently than the allopathic industry does. I
Right.
don't see them as broken. I see them as a body that has a blockage to healing. So what are the blockages? So then we're teachers of health. This is what's blocking you,
Completely agree.
you know?
I completely agree. In fact, um, this is really about trusting yourself, right? And your wise healer within. We're wondrously made. We're perfect. We're whole. We're holy.
Yeah.
We're powerful healers. I mean, the body, talk about being a miracle worker. Everybody has cancer cells every single day. The body
Yeah.
takes care of it. Every day, the body has some cell that's looking to go wonky, but it takes care of it. Maybe you injure yourself. Maybe you are in a plane crash. God forbid. Um, you know, maybe you fall, you trip over the vacuum cleaner cord and you tear the tendons in your ankle. I don't know what it might be, right? There's always something that's coming along, but you don't need to freak out about it because everything that you need to heal and whole yourself is provided for you. And because let's face it, Mother Nature isn't just the plants and the animals and everything, it's also what's here between your two ears. And it's what's here in your heart. And your heart isn't just a pump. It's a vortex. It is a power source. So go within, tap your power source, you know, and just understand, don't freak out when you have a health challenge. It's an opportunity to learn and practice flexibility. And you're going to learn something too along the journey, right? Um, okay. So I want to just talk a little bit about lifestyle medicine because I want to get into minerals and really focus on those a little bit too because they're so important and I think they're so neglected, at least in my experience. But as I said before, really nourishment is the key that unlocks health. And nourish your spirit, right, through meditation and prayer. And then nourish your mind, with choosing better feeling thoughts. You have the power to control your thoughts. You can choose, you can say, oh, I don't like that thought. It feels bad. Let's choose another one. Okay. And you have the ability to nourish your body. And when you do that, it's amazing the results you can get. So eat well, cook your vegetables really well, and eat your grass-fed fed meat as raw as possible. There are a lot of nourishing herbs. A lot of herbalists focus on the fiery or the very dangerous ones, right? But I'm more of a nourisher, right? So think of mom. I'm more interested in nourishing the perfection that's you. So I focus on a lot of nourishing herbs. They provide vitamins and minerals. And the five that I use in rotation I call them green elixirs mainly because they provide very high mineral content. Um, so minerals, this is what they are. This is why they're important in the body. And basically, they make your bones and your teeth, but they do so much more. They actually make your heart beat and they control your hormone flow. I mean, it's incredible. And the beautiful thing about minerals is the body can um, use minerals in lots of different forms, but some of I mean, like calcium, for example, the body can't make it itself. And it's about half of the body's total mineral count. So you definitely need calcium. If you don't get enough calcium, you'll find that your bones are depleted and become brittle. Um, but the excess calcium will store in your bones. So calcium neutralizes acids. So how much calcium do I need every single day? It largely depends on how much meat you eat, which I recommend you eat a lot of meat. It's a good thing. 1,500 milligrams per day of calcium. And so it's tough to get that much calcium from food sources. You know, you can get it from cooked greens, like broccoli, kale, turnip, mustard greens. You can get calcium from collards, wild onions, lamb's quarter, or amaranth greens, a lot higher. Um, and then, of course, the 5 herbs that I use on a rotational basis. Today I'm having stinging nettle, which is bright green. And stinging nettle infusion has about 400 milligrams per cup of calcium, plus magnesium and all the other trace minerals. The beautiful thing about getting your minerals from nature is that Mother Nature has the proportions all worked out for you. So you'll hear a lot of people saying, well, if you take this much calcium, you need to get this much magnesium, and you need D and K and all these other things. Well, the good news is Mother Nature generally takes care of all those combos for you. So, of course, there's the white sources, which include yogurt and whole milk. Um, and just a note on calcium supplements. This is not the way to go. Really not the way to go for lots of different reasons, but primarily the one that bothers me the most is it nearly doubles your heart attack risk, as well as urinary tract infections, and it really makes your bones more brittle, believe it or not. It's density, bone density is what they test people for, but it's bone mass that merely makes a difference, and because chalk's very dense, but it's incredibly brittle. So that's why I say, you know, the nourishing herbal infusions that I call green elixirs are really kind of to the rescue because it's not something special I do. It's just a beverage that I drink every day, right? I drink 4 cups a day. Sometimes I drink 2 cups a day. Sometimes I drink more. And it's really simple and you can make it right there in your kitchen. And those are the 5 herbs that I recommend. And the nice thing is because it's in liquid form, it's easily absorbable. In fact, it starts to go right into the bloodstream as soon as it goes into your mouth. So it doesn't have to go through the digestive process. And this is how you make them. And so all this information is on my website at ancientmotherwisdom.com. And and I also have videos on Rumble teaching you how to make these at home. And you know, they also have a lot of protein, these 5 herbs, so they're going to give you quite a bit of energy. But one thing that I like very much is the idea of feeling and touching the plant. And so when you squeeze out this plant, you know, you develop a relationship with it. In fact, people in rural cultures plant seed by hand. And
Mhm.
there's a movement now to actually, some people put seed in their mouth. So because we need for the seeds to understand who the cooperative force is, right? And who and what needs nourishment. Some people believe that seeds today never touch human hands, and so therefore they're less able to provide what we need. So talk about your experience, I guess, Carrie, with minerals and how critical they are, and kind of you know, do you have a perspective on minerals or?
Yeah, I love bone broth, especially whatever you cook yourself or you make, like you said, touching the plants. And we're supposed to be barefoot outside. We're supposed to touch the soil with our bare hands and get dirty because it's our microbiome exchanging with the microbiome of the soil. It gets that information, and then the plants will then grow the compounds we need. That's why we're not supposed to get vegetables and fruits from halfway across the world. We're supposed to eat what's growing around us because it's not just an apple as an apple, even if it comes from the same heirloom seed. It's what's growing around us. People need to realize that there's like you said, there's an energetic exchange going on. There's an information exchange going on. It's very complex. So we can go into what supplements or what herbs to take, but if people aren't getting the connection that we need with our environment, they're missing the biggest puzzle piece ever. So we've got to go out there and know that the world was created for us. Creation was created for us. and we're supposed to interact with it. We're supposed to cook together. We're supposed to come together and eat at a table. We're supposed to all, pick that plant, that parsley. Maybe you only grow two herbs. That's fine. That's enough because you only need a little bit to nourish your body. But I see all these people, you probably do too, with 20 different supplements, 30 different supplements. You're like, oh my gosh, and they're still not getting enough. That's not what we're supposed to do. If we just do a little bit, not a lot, just start with cooking your own bone broth. Great. Or start with, I'm just growing some herbs. Lovely. Just start doing that. Get your hands dirty and get kids involved, get somebody involved, or have somebody come over your home. When you're doing it together, there is an energetic, shift that happens. And then you don't need a psychologist, you don't need your antidepressants, you don't need anything because you sit around, you talk about your problems. I know it sounds like it's so esoteric and simple, but it's not. It's what we need. And to get off the digital devices, the plants are here to heal us. They can heal us of anything, but we have to understand that we have to participate in this. And it's exciting to find out about all these things that grow around us. So in the beginning of COVID, literally, I don't know where you live, Kimberly, but there wasn't any dandelions growing around or milk thistle, by the way, regular milk thistle. And then literally, boom, one year they started growing. They started growing through all the glyphosate, through all the Roundup. They just started to bloom everywhere.
Yeah.
And I know that it was that because nature knew that's what we needed. We needed those plants to detox our bodies. So what we're supposed to do is then, okay, that's what's growing around us abundantly. Let's make teas out of them. Let's learn how to get the roots and let's get the blossom, right? Or eat the dandelion greens. That's what we're supposed to do
Yeah.
instead of killing them off, right?
Right. I know. Yeah. And the nice thing about dandelion is you can use all the parts of the plant. She is such a virtuoso in that respect. So this is just a slide with some information about dandelion. It's really a very nourishing for the liver. And so in my course, my intro to your wise healer within and herbal medicine, we talk about gut health, we talk about digestion, and then we have a whole section which talks about nourishing the liver because the liver is so key to our health. Here's some other things that actually you mentioned milk thistle. The blessed thistle is a little different, I believe,
Yeah, it is.
variety. So,
Mhm.
yeah. Yellow dock root tincture, oat straw infusion, all of these things. Burdock is also labeled gobo at Asian markets, is very, very good and can be cooked as a vegetable as well. But the liver is a key organ and it works with the kidneys to produce vitamins A and D. The other thing about the liver is get angry because the liver will store unexpressed rage. And so I remember when we were doing Tai Chi at Susan's, we had a punch pillow. And, so that was very good, very cathartic, about getting things. Although, as Susan says, there's something very satisfying about the sound of breaking glass, like with a china plate or something. Uh, but yeah, the liver is super important.
The
And
kidney is fear, right? It harbors fear,
yeah,
uh, which that was a big problem, obviously, in the beginning of COVID as well. The fear and the panic people were harboring.
yeah. And it's I was talking to my nephew the other day after he called to let me know that Patty had passed away. And we were talking a few days later and he said that she was pestering him to get his COVID boosters. And I was quite dismayed at that because she had shared with me, her vax card early on, but he was asking me, he goes, "Oh, well, Aunt Kim, you didn't get vaccinated." And I was like, "No," I said, and I told him the story about my mom. And so here's what happened with my mom. In 2016, she'd had a pulmonary embolism. In 2017, she had two pulmonary embolisms and a DVT in her leg. And that's a deep vein thrombosis, DVT. And then the following year, she got cancer, colon cancer, and then the following year she died. So when my mom got cancer, whenever I advocate for a patient, I probably should have done this in 2016, but I didn't. I always pull all their medical records, all of their blood work, all of their films, not just the reports, but the actual films, and all the primary care physician reports, hospital reports, if that's applicable or whatever. So I remember when my mom had gotten the first PE, I asked her primary care, I was like, well, gee, why would her blood suddenly start to clot? Because, I'm an herbalist. I'm thinking, well, what could we use? Of course, I know, hawthorn and nettle are great for circulation. And she just mumbled something about blood proteins. Didn't really follow up at any point. Um, and so when mom got cancer, I pulled all her blood work and I I don't know exactly what all those things are, but I'm a finance pro and I can rock a spreadsheet. So I took all of her blood work for like the last 10 years and I put a column for each time frame and then, made them all line up and looked up what all those things were and what was the right range. And I was trying to spot a trend. And then I started to go through her primary care records because I wanted to see when she'd last had her colonoscopy, right? When she'd had her last colonoscopy. Because how did you get this giant colon cancer tumor and you get a colonoscopy every 2 years? Anyway, long story short, so what I discovered going through the primary care records was that 2 weeks before her first pulmonary embolism, she'd had her flu shot.
Hmm.
Then I found out that 3 weeks before her two PEs and a DVT in 2017, she'd had her flu shot. And she was still alive at that time. And I was like, Mom, look at this. I was like, once I could say it's a coincidence, but twice? And she's like, yeah, I'm not getting a flu shot. I'm like, I think that's probably a good idea. So after she died, and then the whole COVID thing, I mean, I was still firmly on the left, watching CNN and, I liked Bernie Sanders actually. I liked him a lot. I loved it when that little bird came down and visited him. But anyway, um, I was still firmly on the left when mom died. And so then, I was huddled in the house for a year and, getting my groceries delivered. And I didn't do some of the stupider things, but, I was, going according to my programming. And then when the shots came out, they were like, oh, I'm a high risk. I smoke tobacco and I'm overweight. And I thought, no, 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 I can't get a shot. I have my mother's blood and I saw what the flu shots did to her. So I often say, thank you, Mom. I
Yeah,
appreciate, you laid down your life for me in a lot of ways because who knows?
yeah.
And they have the voice to skull programming now. A lot, they were broadcasting people like, oh, I need to go get my shots, and so one day people would be like, oh no, I'm not getting a shot. And the next day they would wake up and go, oh, I'm just going to go get my shot.
I had three friends tell me that they had that happen to them. Like literally, all of a sudden, one day they're sitting there and they said, "You should go get your shot. It's not going to hurt you." And they actually literally had to think through those thoughts in their head and combat that. And they didn't tell me that until, many months after that. But yeah, how many other people that don't know themselves obeyed that command thinking it was their own thought?
Right.
Wow. I mean, we have no idea how long this technology has been going on for. This is why what you're teaching is so important about knowing ourselves and being connected to, a creator, Father in heaven. I believe in and my Savior too. So if it wasn't for me with my belief system, I don't know how I would have gotten through it. So yeah.
Yeah,
And
when I look back and I'm so grateful to her for that. And I'm also grateful that she transitioned before the COVID because it would have been so hard for her. And just like with my sister, I'm actually quite pleased because she was in so much pain. She'd been in the hospital so much. And so, she had 4 kids and I think she had 14 grandchildren,
wow.
and they're going to miss her. And I'm going to miss her, but she's not gone. This is this is, I think, the important message to people. We have everlasting life. We are eternal beings. So just because we don't carry this skin suit with us throughout. We don't stop being, right? So at least that's my understanding.
Yeah,
And
I do believe we are eternal, but I do also believe we don't all go to the same place.
well, uh, well, it'll be interesting to see. I think there's so much that I think the reason they call it mysteries is because, our brains are probably not capable of really looking upon the full expanse of the knowledge there. I think it would just blow our brains apart. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Supernatural is very real to me. I think it's more real than the physical realm. It
Mm,
depends on how people's experiences, I'm sure. But for me, I've had more than one near-death experience, so
wow.
I know this is not the only thing by far.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I've had a couple of near-death experiences, but
Oh,
I wasn't, aware of what was going on. Although
yeah.
the one was when I had Rise syndrome when I was a kid. I was in a coma for like 4 or 5 days, and when I woke up, I had no short-term memory at all,
Well,
and still struggle with memory to this day. So a lot of things to ponder about that. In fact, the reason I really focus on the liver is because I've had liver issues for my whole life. Reye syndrome, your liver actually stops working altogether. When I was born, I had yellow jaundice and I was about 6 weeks premature and I was in an incubator.
wow.
Then I promptly got the colic when I went home, and my mom had a nervous breakdown 3 months later because, my God, a crying baby that will not stop crying. And probably it was because you know, I'm sure my mom was not awake or whatever for my own labor. I was never breastfed, right? All of these things, probably given soy formula, which is like, oh, so shouldn't be the baby's first food. And as my understanding, baby formula to this day is still soy based, is it not, Carrie?
Oh, yes, and I've looked at some people's labels that they've had, and there's so many chemical names. I can't even identify what these chemicals are. It's way worse than when we were younger, for sure. It's tragedy that that's what's happening right now. Um, so it's and also breast milk is not all the same. That was what was taught to me when I was going through my education. No, what the woman drinks and eats will then change the breast milk. So you have to be healthy, mom, for the healthy breast milk too. It's another thing that is taught improperly in medical school as well.
Right.
Oh yeah, it's we need to go back to some basics and they teach, I think the moms don't do the goat milk, but goat milk has saved a lot of people before, the colicky babies.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, it would
And
have been better than soy, for goodness
yeah,
sakes.
the liver and the gallbladder seem not to work when babies are born prematurely. I
Hmm.
learned that when I did a neonatal rotation. They gave the babies a medicine called Actigol,
Hmm.
which actually breaks down the bile matter so that they can then start to absorb the nutrients because they weren't absorbing it. So I found that interesting. Um, that it goes back to the liver and the gallbladder again.
Right, right. Which definitely I've had some rage too, so I learned to express that. But
The punching bags and breaking glass.
the breaking glass is really great. Actually, when I was in college, it was a big, the fraternity sorority system was big, and so there was this one frat house, and they had a giant target painted on their brick wall in the basement. And so
Uh,
we would go there and we would stand quite a distance and throw beer bottles against it. It was phenomenal. So, but I haven't done that for a while because I haven't found a safe space to do it. But
yeah.
axe throwing
Yeah.
really did the trick. We went axe throwing one time. I was like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
so,
like, cutting down brush or lifting really heavy things, like working in the garden,
yeah,
for me, it helps out a lot. Just something really physical, just to express it.
yeah, that's great. All right, I mean, it's so nice to find somebody that wears the white coat that agrees that, we're really holy and sacred and not just bags of blood and bones, but spiritual, eternal beings. It's just such a refreshing conversation. Although, it was really interesting. I had Dr. Judy Mikovits on the show a few weeks ago, and she blew me away because I was showing her, hang on, let me see. I was showing her this slide of the three traditions of healing. Here it is. And I was talking about how the scientific tradition is linear in terms of get fixed fast, roll the car onto the line and fix it and roll it off. And I was talking about how it was very linear. And Dr. Judy says, "Oh, no, no, no." She goes, "That's the wrong definition of science." I said, "Really?" I said, "Tell me what your definition of science is." Because she's not a doctor, she's a scientist.
Yeah.
She says, "Science is observing nature and then translating what nature does into a language that we can understand."
That's proper science, yes.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is beautiful.
You know?
Yeah.
So, I think that, just having that, willingness to just be open-minded, to be unafraid, because fear is a liar, false evidence appearing real, and it's a very low vibration energy. And when we're in that fear space, um, or that, rage space, it's a little better than fear, but that's a low vibration. And my understanding is that these crazy people, these psychopaths, they kind of feed off of that negative energy, this loosh, they call it.
We're
And
in their reality there. That's where we're in their reality. They literally can't see you. They can't communicate with you when you go to a higher frequency closest to a true love, agape love, unconditional love.
mm,
And physically, scientifically, we get to the plasma state. So you look at water, right? Ice is solid. You get a little more energy. You go into the liquid state, water. All life has water. You then get a little more energy, it goes to the steam state. Okay, we know that. But force state, they hid from us. We get a little more energy, it goes to the plasma, the ionized, the charged state. It looks like an electric, it's kind of a blue-green a lot of times. But literally, that's what the heart produces. That's what a woman can do when her child is stuck in her car. She can lift it up. That's what all of us can do, by the way. When you get into this state, where you're not overthinking yourself. You just go and you do it from a pure love where you don't care if you lay down your life for another. That is a superpower. And that is the superpower that will overcome all of this evil. And we all have it inside of us. And together there's a synergy. And the number 12, Jesus had 12 disciples. There's a reason for that. There's a synergy with that. There's a superpower. It's God's EMP. You could see it from low orbit space. That is what we need to focus on, but it takes practice. So even me, I have Dr. Masuro Emoto's the water crystals, looking at what each word means. Even when I was a kid, I had some good teachers about seedlings. We had two groups of seedlings. We said amazing, beautiful things to with all of our heart, and the other group we said ugly things to. Thought about bad things. And within a month, they were very different. I'll never forget that experiment we did in second grade. What if we all did that? I mean, that's how we should live our life because that is more powerful than learning what supplement to take and all of that. We're going to get down to that moment, I think, in our lifetimes where we're going to have to know who and what we are and whose we are, right? So I'm got off on a tangent there, sorry, but
no, it's totally, I mean, you're totally spot on. It's not the physical. It's beyond that. And see, even just describing it in language is difficult.
yeah.
I mean, describe the color yellow. Go ahead. I'll give you a minute. You can't. You can't, right? You just can't do it. So there are things that are beyond language. I mean, when you go and you appreciate a piece of art or a sculpture, right? It's just so much. I mean, there aren't really words for that. It's just it's the experience, and what it does to our vibration and our frequency. And I love what you said because this is so important for people to understand because there are so many people living in fear today is they can't touch you. In fact, they can't even see you when your vibration is high. So when you're vibrating in this love frequency, love, joy, appreciation frequency, they can't touch you. You're invincible. It's your
Apathy.
superpower.
One thing people need to know is apathy is closest to death. And they're in the dead realm. The demonic realm is in the dead realm. And remember, apathy is closest to death. That is so powerful to know because how many people are apathetic right now? They don't have an opinion on anything. They don't want to. So I caution people on that. Even anger is a better quality than apathy. Um,
It's up the emotional guidance scale. Yes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's important to know where are you living? Are you living in fear? Then this is what you're going to communicate with.
Right.
Are you living out of that true unconditional love or trying to? Then this is what you communicate with. And then I see that our world will be separating in two kind of dimensions so that we can't live with each other, right? This synthetic human, transhuman that's in the dead realm, we won't be able to live with them. It's impossible, but we won't have to really worry about it. There's going to be some exchanges that go on. I'm not going to say it's easy, but I see us separating into two.
Yeah. Well, there's an ancient cave painting in somewhere in Hopi territory, and it actually shows a path splitting, and you know, humanity, keeps going, but they're on two parallel paths, and I think, that might very well happen, or maybe, the alpha males will kill themselves eating some tainted meat, going, with their overreach, right? And implode themselves, right? I hold out hope there. Because here's the beautiful thing. When you trust and know that all is well,
Mm,
then you don't have to worry so much about how it's going to happen. And then you make room for the miracle.
yeah.
Because if I and this I'm a control freak from the get. So I really have incorporated this. And so I have a very specific way I want it to happen. If it doesn't happen that way, then I get upset. But what I realized some years ago is that by I'm choking the life out of it. I'm
Yeah.
I'm actually taking sources universe down to this tiny little thing that my mind can conceive of. And so when I give that up and I just go get happy, the thing manifests. So here's a great example. So when my mom passed away, my sister and I had purchased her this, she had COPD. So we purchased, it was like $3,000 bed. It went up in the front and the top, and it went up in the back, and it lifted, and it had a remote, and it practically like lifted, practically flew. But when she died, I needed to get it out of there so I could get new carpet and move my bed in. So I put it up for, I think, $1,500, and I was flat broke when she died. And I was panicking because it wasn't selling, and I needed by date certain to get out of my apartment. And I was freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to have to give it away. I really need the money, and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, so one day, I don't know, I was just like, I was laughing. I was laughing at something. And about that time, the phone rang. And it was this guy. He's like, oh, my mom has COPD. I really can use this bed. Can I come see it tonight? And I was like, sure. And, it was just like that. At the moment that I stopped worrying and fussing and trying to, you know, put my imprint on it, get it under my thumb, it manifested, right? All I had to do was go forget about it and go get happy. So
Yeah.
when you have that trust that all is well, then you're not so bothered about what's going on with this person or that authority or this thing, right? Because it has so much less impact on you. So you can make your life a lot easier if you just choose a better feeling thought. You always have the opportunity in every moment. So,
Yeah.
yes, that's what I've been really working on these last few years, giving up my control. Because, it's like the weather monitor, right? Like I can only see the weather that's here. I don't know what's coming. And so the way, a source will give it to me is something probably, it usually comes out completely different than what I would have, the way I would have orchestrated it. So it's fun.
Yeah, I've been learning that same thing that you're talking about because I've always been, okay, I got to have an extra plan. I've got to have a backup plan and a triple backup plan. And you know what? I've learned that that doesn't always work. And I've got humbled definitely in these last few years. But then when you finally surrender, and I've learned to surrender, wow, something beautiful happens, right? The most unexpected thing comes out of nowhere. And then I look back at least, and I'm like, wow. It's just like, wow, I'm so humbled, you know? So yeah, I'm learning the same thing as you, Kimberly, and letting our creator kind of guide me.
Right.
Yeah.
Let go and let God, I think. That was a bumper sticker at one point, when in the
Yeah.
80s.
Yeah, learning when to surrender and when to take action.
Right.
That's always a challenge. Gonna pray
It
about.
is. It is. And for me, I'm working on that too because I really feel it's important that I take the action I'm inspired to take, not the one that I'm motivating myself to take, or not the one that I'm trying hard at.
Yeah.
Because there's something about that attitude of trying that, trying is always lying, right? You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. There is no try. And so, but really, I haven't really figured out like this whole other part of myself. I mean, I know how to be a mortgage broker, but how much do I want to spend time in that versus how much time do I want to spend in this, you know? And so I'm really at this point now where I'm at this opening place to say, okay, I don't know how it's going to work out, but mama needs to some money. So figure it out, universe. So we'll see.
Yeah. It's like trying to reinvent yourself again. But
Yeah.
it's exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's a little almost 8 o'clock, and I know we both have a bit of a hard stop. So, how can people find and follow you, Carrie? And what closing messages would you have for the audience?
Just my website, carriemade.com, and we do Tuesday Tribe Talks, educational things, call to prayers. Find those very important these days. So, and I have social media contacts on that. But the closing message is that we are in the most pivotal time, I believe, of our written human history, and that I believe that we've all been chosen for this time. Nothing is a coincidence at all. And I feel it is an honor to be here. But we have to be alert and aware and understand what I call the adversary, the enemy is trying to do. It's a battle of the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And that we have everything we need, but we just have to go within, like you said. I believe in prayer, goes outside of time space. I believe in getting together, that plasma energy field that we can create, science, but it's also biblical as well. Um, and that we need to start looking at creation again. Looking at creation has all the answers that we need. Our bodies were made to do superhuman things, and I think that we will see that in our lifetime. So, and love is the most powerful thing scientifically and biblically. So, I have full faith and belief in that. And it's going to be exciting seeing what comes our way. It's all the lens that we look at it through.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Carrie, and we'll definitely have to have you on for part two. And I'm so excited that you're now not that far from me. So
I
look
know.
forward to having more conversations and
I would love to get together with you. I'll contact you after this.
perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll be back next week, which is St. Patrick's Day. Actually, I may be going to a party in Riverview in on St. Patty's Day, but so well, stay tuned. But Weeds of Wisdom will be back. Let's see, who do I? Oh, I have Doc Massey. Dr. Richard Massey is coming on the 24th, and he is a specialist in heart math and recall healing. So I think you'll enjoy the episode there. And if I don't see you next week, then happy St. Patrick's Day. And thank you so much to Carrie Madej, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you, everybody.